Am I
Should
introducing?
I? Oh, God. Welcome to Charting Change in Legal. I am Ari Kaplan, an analyst that covers the legal industry, and I'm here
Oh,
with my friend.
Caroline Hill. I am the editor-in-chief of Legal IT Insider. It's great to see you, Ari.
Great to see you, Caroline. I am looking forward to this conversation. I understand that you have been busy sharing ideas about many topics, really actually only one topic exclusively. So tell us about that.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, so well, this week I had two webinars, which we do them regularly, but we had back to back this week, which has made for a bit of an interesting, challenging week, but really interesting because they were both looking at the practical applications of Gen AI. So we have talked about Gen AI for a long time. The first one was with Net Documents, talking about Pattern Builder Max, which is their document automation, Gen AI document automation solution. And we had a client on with them talking about how they're using Gen AI to speed up the process. And then we also did a webinar with Lexsoft. And again, they had a client from Morgan Lewis in that case talking about they're not actually using so Lexsoft do this and are in the knowledge management space. They integrate with iManage. And they've got a product called T3, which they've recently launched a Gen AI product for, which really accelerates knowledge management in terms of classification, automatically tagging documents, etc., etc. So it was really cool to see those practical use cases. And in that case, Morgan Lewis aren't yet using the Gen AI solution, but Samantha Ventrella, who's in the knowledge team, was interviewing CEO of Lexsoft, which made for me my role on that webinar very easy. But it's great to see those really practical applications of how firms are using Gen AI.
Yeah, well, I have been in the midst of interviewing mid-size law firm leaders, so CIOs, COOs, executive directors, and every time there's a new program where somebody seems to be deploying generative AI in some meaningful way, I think that it gives this impression that everyone is doing it, and
Well,
it's still rare in many ways for a company to have spent enough time to be able to talk about a use case where they have seen lots of success, which is not to say that you wouldn't if you did it. I just think that it's interesting when someone comes on and talks about it because there are all these others who are, waiting to determine what the best course of action is. Everybody's interested, everybody's studying it, but not
yeah,
everyone is taking action at this point. So there's sort of a double edge there in terms of there are good examples of people who are getting value, but then there's this impression that everyone is doing it but me. And
yeah,
I often try to give the firms that I'm talking to and others when I'm able to speak publicly is just to say, look, everybody is basically in a similar position. So, uh, you know, walk and try to do these things in a way that is going to be meaningful for your team as opposed to trying to keep up.
yes. And it's so with the knowledge management example I gave, they're not using Gen AI. They're using T3, the Lexos knowledge management system, and they were, I have to say, must have been great for Lexos because they're really impressed with the new product. They're not using it yet. So, and I think you're right. It's important. I think we were hopefully really clear that this was a demo. And of the new functionality. I think what I meant by practical use cases was that, it was really talking through rather than in very high level terms. It was showing us no doubt they will be using it, to be honest. But so a very practical webinar. We've gone quite product heavy in our webinars recently for good reason. But then I have to say with the Net Documents one, with the document automation, we were talking to Lewis Silkin, who's a big UK firm, to one of the guys, Daniel Solomon, who's in their tech team, and they are using the Gen AI NetDocs Pattern Builder Max, and that was great because they talked through from a user experience how they're using it, and actually talked through some. They didn't want to do a demo in case of confidentiality, but they talked through practical use cases and screenshots. And I get what you're saying. I do think though that we're getting to that stage. Perhaps you and I will disagree on this, which would be quite interesting. I do think we're getting to a stage where people should probably be doing something, like I do think that clients, because of the client expectation, I do think if you're not doing anything, then clients will start to ask questions. Do you disagree with that?
Clients are already asking questions depending on
Yeah.
the size of the firm and the size of the client, but they want to know what their firms are doing, how they're using their data, how they're discarding their data. Are they training the entire system that they're using their data and other people's data? There are sophisticated clients asking sophisticated questions and law firms that need to answer those questions. The lingering issue is if I don't have a sufficient volume of contracts or litigation documents, and if I don't have a certain use case that jumps out at me, where am I deploying this? These are the questions that are coming up. I often hear, oh, we're using it in marketing. Marketing is using it to create some content. We're using it in our communications team. They're using it to draft press releases. We are not really using it for legal work. And, in some ways we are using it for some other kind of business of law use cases. But I think that as we get further into this sort of year, right, we're kind of at the end of the first quarter, and we had two big tech conferences. We'll have several others coming up. The Corporate Legal Operations Consortium annual conference. We'll have the Association of Legal Administrators annual conference. A few months later, we'll have Ilticon, and there are several conferences in between. And I just think that it'll be interesting to see where the others who are participating in these events and talking about it and kind of getting together in groups reveal their challenges and try to highlight certain opportunities that are more practical for your everyday kind of firm that has a range of issues rather than folks that deal with specific kinds of matters that this is to which this can really, really be helpful.
I think, yeah, so that's interesting. It was interesting that with both of these ones, they're in the document management space, right? So one's around NetDocs, one's around iManage. You've obviously got a huge amount of information. They're using it in very different ways. They're leveraging that information in very different ways. One of them is to produce very quickly documents, and the other one to make sure that documents are discoverable. And it's interesting that I think where firms are finding early value is through their business partners, through the vendors. Excuse me. And yeah, the DM space seems to be a logical one. They do have a huge amount of information in there. Often it's not very easy to discover, what you've got or be able to use it. They understand that there's an opportunity. So some of the early use cases seem to be in that space, which is quite interesting and perhaps not surprising. But I take your point. I still think the onus is on us to. I think you're absolutely right to be clear. We shouldn't overplay how much people are sort of adopting these solutions. I think you're right. This is a responsibility to be sensible and talk about things in terms of being clear about where people are at, and that not everybody is fully up and running on Gen AI. You're absolutely right. It's still early days. But I do
Well,
think
I often ask people questions such as, are you documenting your repeatable processes? Are you creating workflows around your repeatable processes? Are you automating your repeatable processes? And I feel like there are certain baseline activities that firms would like to accomplish, and maybe they can do so simultaneously, as opposed to in preparation for this next wave of applications. But I think that some firms are much further ahead than others. And then there are those firms that are really on the leading edge, and those are the ones that are participating in a lot of these events. And you see similar names, and they have earned that advantage. And for the giant swath of firms, however, it who aren't there, I think it's fair to say that it's okay not to be there. Although, as you said, they're all having conversations and creating committees and trying to put together some type of guidelines which makes sense and will allow them to go from, zero or one very quickly to six or seven because they've kind of outlined it and have some examples of those who are on the edge. And so you'll see this happening quickly. Someone described the progress as something in dog years. So that a year is what 7 years used to be in terms of progress and in terms of implementation of some of these tools. So it's probably fair to tell people it's okay to be waiting, but there's a shorter window to wait than there has been in the past. I think that's probably the most diplomatic way to describe this current window.
I know. Yeah, I just don't know. You see some firms pulling so fast ahead, right? The obvious. You can see some really obvious names. So in the last couple of weeks, since I think probably since we last spoke, so Clifford Chance announced that it was rolling out Copilot globally, which I wrote about.
Hmm.
So they're the first law firm that I'm aware of that have. So there's a few firms trialing it, but they created quite some waves by not only doing rolling out a few hundred users, but everyone in Clifford Chance is going to get Copilot. So that created quite some surprise. It's a huge investment financially, and and they're sort of I don't know. I'm not suggesting that the big firms are going to be the ones necessarily that pull ahead, because as we know, there are some amazing smaller firms who are really agile and who are really forward thinking, and so but I do think that the firms that I'm seeing, and if there's firms out there that I'm not seeing that want to get in touch, then please do. um, but the firms I'm seeing are typically the bigger ones, and they're going forward in a really strong way, and they are not just talking about it, right? Clifford Chance has rolled out Copilot globally, and there's all sorts of surprises and challenges around that. So I spoke to, and actually, funnily enough, this echoes what you just said. I spoke to the CTO of a UK top 50 law firm after that announcement, and they said they were furious. They were like, "This is so unhelpful because now I'm going to have every partner in the firm asking me why we're not rolling out Copilot, and I actually don't think that we need it, and I don't think there's still a debate over whether we could just use various other technologies to achieve exactly the same thing, but it creates this pressure and it creates a really unhelpful dialogue. um and they're saying they're sort of warning and wary of the whole sheep mentality. I think if we can just warn against one thing, it's that, like, you have to make sure whatever you do is right for your business, and not just because somebody else has done it. I think that's probably one thing that we can be completely safe in saying.
One thing that this has done, regardless of where the decision falls, is that it's really elevated again the and required a collaboration between the uh, IT team, the knowledge management team, the people at the firm who are always willing to participate in pilots or committees, because it really does require a thoughtful evaluation and to really understand where it will be applied at the organization in the broadest way possible, right? You want to get for the investment, you want to get the greatest value. So it really is important to figure out where you can get some quick wins, where you can show people immediate transformation.
Yeah.
And that I think that's always been a challenge in firms in general. And you see this really interesting collaboration between the teams.
Do you know, on the webinar with Net Documents, Daniel from Lewis Silkin had some interesting observations. He was talking about creating, this isn't brand new, but he said it's really working effectively to have your kind of best friend or your mole or whatever you call it in different departments. You know, somebody you're we would probably boringly call them an early adopter. You know,
Hmm.
you've got three sort of different tiers. You've got your early adopters, you've got your middle of the road, and then you've got your slow ones, and you have to work on the top tier, particularly the top ones. And he was saying, you know, just having it's really funny amidst all this tech talk. He was talking about the value of just conversations, you know, and the word of mouth, and when things work they really work, you know, and so um not, you know, just having a couple of people, one or two people who have used whatever it might be and who can talk to other people, and you know, and I guess now people are back in the office more, that's probably also more helpful, I imagine.
Yeah, well, it's just interesting. Your point is so interesting to me because in our efforts to give machines more responsibilities and to take over more of the work that humans do, it's forcing humans to interact and have thoughtful conversations with each other in a much more proactive way. So, hopefully that, that will continue because that's an important part of it. And I agree with you that there's still a challenge of where do people work and when do they come into the office? Regardless of what the policies are, we are still in a transitional stage in that regard in general. Some firms have it down, everyone comes in. Some firms fully remote, we're okay. Some firms anchor day Wednesday. We've seen them all the ideas, but this is I would definitely describe us as still in some form of a transition.
I said to my team on a meeting just today. We're all based in the UK, and I said, "Oh, we should do online drinks, you know, because we don't really ever do drinks together. You know, we meet, we chat regularly, but we've got together for like serious meetings and stuff, like, you know, but we've not really done drinks." And I said, "Yeah, we should do online drinks." And they went, "Why don't we just get together for in-person drinks?" And I went, "We could do in-person drinks."
Yeah, yeah. I think that I've actually been trying, especially as the weather gets nicer, to be better about accepting getting together in person. And I think that more people will start to embrace that. I hope, because there's a certain value that you can't quite quantify, at least periodically. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't want to get into a whole should we go back to the
Ah,
office? Should
sorry,
we
sorry.
work remotely? But it comes up a lot, and I think it's an important conversation.
I agree with you. We're getting into award season, so I'm going to be going to ALM. Have got their Legal Innovation Awards in May. So, and I'm lucky enough to be a judge for that. So I'll be going to the awards then, which will be quite fun. And then I think you've got some other, you know, we've got quite a lot of other in-person stuff. Obviously, I don't know if I'm going, but we've got Clock. We've got quite a lot of other fun stuff coming up in May, which isn't so far away. I think the ALM, we published the ALM announcements this week. So we'll be judging on that quite soon, which should be quite fun.
Yeah, I love seeing those. I love seeing what interesting, cool things people are doing, and respect all of those entries because they're time intensive and require lots of buy-in, and not going to be an easy thing to judge. Although I can't believe
I,
it's the end of the first quarter of the year
I
already,
know.
and that we have so many other things coming up. But I'm looking forward to it, and I have, as always, enjoyed this conversation, Caroline.
Next time we talk, I've got to tell you about another cool thing, which is LTC4's new alliance. Okay, all right. Bye,
All right,
everyone.
bye. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Charting Change in Legal.